Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We have a short today on a topic that's on, I think, a lot of people's mind, and that is how the Ravens can keep MacDonald in the organization after his fantastic year here and a good solid first year as well as the Ravens defensive coordinator. And here to discuss that with me is David Patrick. David, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. I'm very excited to talk about something that originally, when I thought of this a few weeks ago, we kind of discussed, hey, can we keep MacDonald? Let's try and get a succession plan. And so I'm excited to kind of dive into that more now that it seems like everyone has reached this conclusion independently that this guy's too good to let him walk out the door at the end of the season.
Right. So there is a minority group that is present almost in every fan base that wants to fire the head coach for everything that they can point to and blame the head coach for everything. That group is extremely vocal. In Pittsburgh, the Fire Tomlin group is extremely vocal. There is an extremely vocal Fire Harbaugh group. And if you go out other places, it's even the majority in places like Staley with LA. Most people think he'll be gone at the end of the year, so it's not a surprising thing. But anyway, the Fire Harbaugh group is a incredibly loud minority that I don't think is representative of our fan base at all, frankly, in terms of really wanting to keep a coach has had tremendous success. And I know that's one of the points you wanted to make was just looking at successful organizations like the Steelers and some of the other ones. They have very long tenured head coaches.
That might be the most important thing. I don't know if Harbaugh is an X's and O's genius, but he gives stability and he brings in the right people. Just like watching a movie, a director might not be so good with cinematography, but they're able to get all the different pieces together to create a great film. I think Harbaugh is an artist in that way, raised by a coach, always been a coach's mindset. What have we got, 16 years? How many years is he with us now?
See, this is 16.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, year 16. Sign me up for 4 more, maybe one more Super Bowl and let him ride off into whatever his next passion project is.
Is there a reason why, and this is, I guess, one of the central topics here in manifesting something like this, is there a reason why Harbaugh should be limited to 4, 5, 6 more years, whatever it might be?
He should be limited in the same way that Ozzie Newsome should have been limited. Ozzie Newsome is a Hall of Fame executive, but Eric DeCosta has youth on his side and might be just as good as him. And we don't want him to leave because there might not be another Eric DeCosta. That's how I personally look at Mike MacDonald. He's homegrown. He started with us. He might be the finest mind that we've had in the organization, and Harbaugh's discussed this, and we'll get into that. I don't want him to leave. I think that he's the next one. So whatever we can do to keep him to stay, if he just wants to be a defensive coordinator, great, sign him up, pay him a lot of money. But I think that he is going to be a head coach eventually. And so I want him to be our head coach. And I want to be like the Steelers, who have had, 3 head coaches in 40 plus years. Mm-hmm. That's what I want in Baltimore. That's what Bisciotti wants. That's what our organization is built on, consistency. The grass is not greener, folks. We don't want to lose our defensive coordinator this year, lose Harbaugh in a few years when he retires, and then we get someone like Staley with the Chargers. God bless him. He's not the solution with the roster that talented. No thanks.
Now, the Ravens do have other people on the staff who I think people would consider head coaching candidates. In particular, I think Anthony Weaver is an excellent candidate. But let's talk about, I think, I know you have a long list of reasons why we would want MacDonald, but maybe hit on a couple of the high points here. We don't need to go into the statistics because I think everybody agrees that he's worth it from that. But talk about some of the other things. You have youth was one thing you mentioned.
Yeah, so he's 36 years old. So if we wanted 20 more years of a consistent head coach that we want, we have that in him. I really like that Eric DeCosta was raised by us into our organization and blossomed into someone that we couldn't let go of. So the Raven way, that's partially DeCosta. What do I love about MacDonald? To quote Harbaugh, when MacDonald went from an assistant with the Ravens and actually became a linebacker coach, his first year was with Wink Martindale. And Harbaugh came out and said, I found the quote. I won't quote it to you, but in general, MacDonald was integral in creating that scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And then when MacDonald was loaned out to his brother at Michigan for his first defensive coordinator job 2 years ago, it was Harbaugh who said to Jim, hey, I have the guy for you for defensive coordinator. And then when he brought him back after Wink left, he actually beat out Weaver, who I think is a great leader of men and is going to be an excellent head coach in his own right, beat him out because Harbaugh said, MacDonald is too smart. He's too good at breaking things down. He's too good at relationships with his players, communicating. And the most important thing for me, he's going to upgrade his system that he left for Wink and make it even better. And we're seeing the fruits of that.
All very good points. All right. And I think that in most cases, we don't have a problem with that. Youth in general is directly connected to relatability. I will say, I think what he's done, players have certainly raved about it in terms of understanding the whole scheme, to understand their part in the scheme. And that really has showed up in terms of the way the Ravens play a very integrated defensive style that's there. In terms of a relatability of a coach, it's hard for me to imagine anybody more relatable than Weaver. He's a player's player, and he's a leader of men. That's very obvious, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily the greatest X's and O's guy.
Right.
On the other side of things, Weaver is African American, and I don't want to go too deep into the race thing here, but there's two benefits from it. One is if Weaver becomes a head coach out of your system by being defensive, so you get 2 third-round picks out of that. Number two is, and by the way, Weaver could be hired as a head coach directly from his current position. I don't think that's out of the question at all, but I'd be looking to increase Weaver's responsibility within the current system to try and make sure he's visible in every way possible. Don't really want to lose him, but on the other hand, he'd be a good choice. I also think he'd be a good defensive coordinator if MacDonald were to move up, and I think that it would be something where they would be jointly running the show.
I completely agree with you. To me, my read of Weaver is maybe he's not the generational genius that MacDonald is, but if MacDonald never existed and we had Weaver around, I would probably be saying something similar. I like him that much. Mm-hmm. And so I hope there's a way to retain him too. But if we lose MacDonald, I really hope we have Weaver, because that to me is 1A, 1B.
Yeah. Well, it certainly would be outstanding if Weaver's hired away from the Ravens into a head coaching role. That would be very cool. And if Weaver is here in a more visible, more prominent role, I'm for that too. The guy is just absolutely amazing at the podium. His comportment is just really understands how to deal with the media, but also, which I don't think he'll have. I think he'd be better at it than Harbaugh is. Let's put it that way. Now, you don't always know because stress is really the point at which these things come out. I would say if you go to Las Vegas, you meet more weirdos in a week than you do in a year at home, because you're observing this first of all, large new group of people that you never met before, and you're observing them under very stressful circumstances, losing money, and odd behaviors come out. So, but in Weaver's case, I honestly don't think that would be a problem. He'd have to, develop his own manner, but I think he'd be every bit as good as Harbaugh or better in terms of dealing with the media.
I also feel like, to me, there's something about being a Ravens fan that has gone beyond me just being originally from Baltimore and it being my team. Now that I'm getting up there in age, I really care about who I'm investing my time in. Mm-hmm. Someone like Bisciotti, who is a good person through and through for my read, that's someone I would invest my time in. Ozzie Newsome, Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh. These are quality human beings that make me proud to be a fan of the organization, even when bad things happen, like Browns losses or lost seasons. So Weaver, right up there. Grade A human being. He's also good at what he does. Bring him on. I'd love it. So I'm glad that we have, to me, almost this problem that there are 2 guys, and probably more on our staff, honestly. The staff is loaded. We're sitting pretty. If someone wants to join in a succession plan, I think that's really just up to Harbaugh, Bisciotti, DeCosta. And my hope is, Ken, is that it already happened, because we found out about Eric DeCosta's 5-year succession plan in year 4.
Oh, there was, there was news out there of it before then, but yes. Okay.
It wasn't confirmed. Like, that's what I mean. Sorry. Going back, it was like Bisciotti confirmed it the year before it happened.
Is the situation exactly analogous? Now, here's what I would ask of this is that, and I guess I'm going to take the position that it isn't, is that in the case of Ozzie Newsome, first of all, up there in age, and so even more so than Harbaugh in terms of where he was, and I don't remember the exact age.
He was 63. I looked it up. He was 63 when they
switched.
So
it could be that he's actually does it younger, but DaCosta was his guy through and through coming up through the system. And he promoted him into that number 2 spot. You could point to that as being similar for MacDonald, but it was from a fairly early time. It was understood that DaCosta was going to have Newsome's role at some point, if it was going to be a while, if he held out long enough. Yep. Even though maybe we didn't know about the money exactly how it was working out before then. But Newsome also is a special cat in his ability to smoothly transition into the chair immediately to the right of Eric's and have a role. I don't see that for Harbaugh. I don't think he would want to be assistant head coach in charge of special teams, which is exactly what Jerry Rosberg was, by the way. That
would be cool.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Never thought about that.
And I'm sure that the special teams could benefit from that. I think that there would be reasons why it would be a good plan. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that it's exactly what you'd want if you're Harbaugh or if you're MacDonald. Because if you have MacDonald, if you have a voice chirping in your ear who's been making the decisions for 20 years, and now he has his suggestion to you at a given point, maybe not.
So 2 things come to mind just from my preparation for today's episode. Is this analogous from Eric and Ozzie to potentially Mike and John? What I gather from Eric and Ozzie's relationship is not only mentor-mentee, which is a little bit different when Harbaugh has so many coaches underneath of him, but they became best friends. They talk about that. Like there's a bond there that I think will go on for the rest of their life. But what Ozzie did to me, it's really the end, the third act of The Godfather Part 1. He is Brando to Michael, and he's his consigliere. Hey, you're in charge. Let me advise you. And Ozzie's the most expensive scout in the league for the Ravens. I love having him here. I don't think that's perfectly analogous with Mike and John, but I don't know that it could not happen, I guess is what I'm saying. And would Mike MacDonald be okay with that? I mean, judging someone's personality when you don't even know him is all pure conjecture, but that's also part of the fun of being a fan. And so I read a piece when MacDonald was first hired. I reread it. It was by Ryan Mink, kind of doing his cover story on him. And in the beginning, they were talking about MacDonald as a teenager, talking about him as a 20-something math genius who was going to make millions on Wall Street. And his dad had talked about how he never had to worry about him making a bad decision, and becoming a football coach instead of doing this was the first time he kind of questioned his son. At least that's how the story reads. And so to me, that's kind of that. You made me think of that. Harbaugh whispering in his ear. Could he handle it? Absolutely. Because he evaluated the situation and said, I want to do this. And his dad said, okay. So I think he can take in a multitude of inputs and then process them. And that's what I would want any head coach to do.
Okay. We have had smart coaches in the past, and Billick maybe is a step down from MacDonald, let's say. I don't think he's necessarily a step down from Harbaugh. I think he might be similar, honestly. It's not immediately obvious to me that one is sharper than the other. But Billick was a very sharp guy, and he was also very confident in his own decision making. So he was able to take inputs, make the call himself. And that's why, in a very long stretch of time, he's the only coach that ever went for 2 when he was down 8 at the end of a game, the way you're supposed to by the chart, the 2-point conversion chart. So it was. I think he's always been very good at taking the inputs properly, making his decision based on that with him. And yet, when he came with a near peer in 2006 with Fossil calling the offensive plays, it became uncomfortable for him. And in the end, he had to fire Fossil.
If you found a $100 bill on the ground, you wouldn't walk past it. So don't pass up a chance at easy cash with MyBookie. MyBookie has the biggest online selection of odds and contests to fill all your sports betting needs, anytime, anywhere. So you can turn that sports knowledge into cash in your wallet. Bet on the NFL, college bowl games, or play for your share of big cash prizes in the weekly blackjack tournaments. And if you've been waiting for the right time to get in on the action, that time is now. Make your winning move today. Sign up at MyBookie and use the promo code RAVENS to claim your deposit match, redeemable up to $1,000. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your bonus. Experience the thrill of sports betting right from the comfort of your home. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
Because he thought, this is not going well enough. This is potentially impacting my job. And both of these guys, it's not necessarily easy for people who've had a lot of responsibility to take advice well from other people who have been at a similar level. It's much easier to take advice from your interns, your actuarial students, your people who you've worked with for 5 years. It's much harder to take advice from somebody who's outside the organization or is coming from outside the organization and is at a peer level. And there's naturally some conflict that arises from that.
Yeah. I don't have that doesn't spur too many thoughts for me, because I just look at MacDonald and it seems like he has handled, in my research, every scenario he's ever been with class and success. Mm-hmm. Just from an age standpoint, like that can make two people equal where maybe they shouldn't be. And he coached Weddle to one of Weddle's greatest seasons when he was the DB coach. Weddle had, I think, 6 picks and he was in his 30s. MacDonald was in his 30s. No friction, enhanced each other. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a problem. You won't really know until someone takes that leadership standpoint, but it seems like his leadership standpoint so far, I haven't seen big negative drop-offs, but then that's human dynamics I'm not aware of with the Ravens coaching staff.
And to be clear, MacDonald is never in danger of taking Eric Weddle's job. So the dynamic there is inherently different from a coach to coach situation where you have that.
That's a good point.
Let's move on. And now the other part of this is, how do the Ravens implement such a scheme?
Well, I think it really starts with Harbaugh and Bisciotti having the conversation. I don't think that Bisciotti would spurn Harbaugh or force him into retirement when he's given so much to the organization. And we're trending up so well, at least right now. I don't know how the salary cap scenario is going to go in the future. So I think they have to agree that this is something they both want. So I think that's step one. I don't know
who initiates that conversation.
I would think Bisciotti. I've heard reports this couple weeks getting ready for this where people go back and look at Bisciotti's scenario with Eric and Ozzie, and he intimated, and I haven't heard the quote, that if Ozzie wasn't okay with giving way to Eric, that Bisciotti would have kind of told him, well, this is how many years I'll give you.
Okay, that's interesting. I know that one of the things they said at the very end, when the hiring decision had been made and the transition point had already been set out, was that the thing that finally pushed them to make the move was that the Packers were interested in EDC, and that they thought they might have lost him that way. But I don't disagree with you. One of the things that the Ravens have, and as part of it is from Bisciotti's background as a hiring manager, is a very strict line responsibilities in terms of who gets to hire who and who gets to fire who. And as far as I've known, Bisciotti has never reached down 2 levels in the organization and said, you got to fire this guy. There may have been discussions over something like Ray Rice, for example. I'm not talking about something like an acute problem like that comes up. But I don't know of any other times where he's reached around. And I also don't know any other times where he reached around and said, you know what, why don't we make this defensive coordinator hiring an organizational decision instead of yours? So when Mark McNeil was hired, I mean, he's an internal guy. He did turn out to be excellent, for his time. He was a great hire, but Bisciotti could have forced him to go outside of the organization in theory.
Yeah. I think that Bisciotti probably seems like when they go down to Florida in the off season, creates a dialogue and conversation and advises his people to make the best decision without saying, you have to take my decision. But the only time that it seems to me that he's really planted his flag, and maybe I'm wrong, is when he hires a head coach and when he creates a succession plan, but he's only done that once.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
Hiring a head coach that's his direct report. There's nobody else in the organization between him. So that's his purview. I'm trying to think of any of the other times where a non-straight line relationship he strayed from. And I don't know of them. Of course, you mentioned the Jupiter meetings, and those probably are exactly where those discussions are occurring, right, in terms of what they need to do. I think a lot of that, would be around players and, what do you want to do? And do you need money for this? Do we need to be sacrificing the future? Do we need to be thinking about a non-level kind of a roller coaster we want to take our team on? So they're good controls for those sorts of things. But I don't get the sense that they would be breaking that direct line hiring. It's one of the worst things you could tell somebody, by the way, is they don't get to hire the person they get. It's like you might as well fire the person because you basically don't have any trust in their hiring practices. Right. You don't have any trust in them at all.
Right. I mean, to me, I think that we both agree that if for some reason Harbaugh is not our coach in the future, whatever that may be, Bisciotti is going to have a very active role in being the decider on who is our head coach.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And so to me, I have heard Bisciotti say he's not going to do the nepotism thing. His boys or daughters, I don't know if he has daughters, no one in the family is going to take over as the Ravens owner. And so to me, he has really the main responsibility that we would all hope for with that, which is find another owner almost as good as you. Because I don't know if there's another one as good as you who represents Baltimore as much as I would want, who gives us faith that we have a great team, a great organization with class. But why not give us a gift of that stability that some of our most heated adversaries have, which is stability at the head coaching position? You gave us Eric. He's got, I would think, at least a decade left. Give us another head coach with a succession plan. If it's not MacDonald, because they know better than I do whether or not it's him, if it's worth it. Give us someone who will give us 10, 20 more years of stability. If you're not going to pass off this ownership to your family or stick on, give us another piece that's like, we're good. Because I love, like you love being a season ticket holder, every year being in the hunt.
Me too. And I think, Bisciotti came on as a minority owner to Modell. I would love to see that sort of technique used. Find somebody in finance, find somebody who's committed to Baltimore. It was made, billions, and hopefully could keep this team right where it is and deal with Baltimore. The Angelos family has been obviously a pretty big shock to the system in terms of Baltimore fans and not liking what's going on. It is kind of a shakedown that's going on right now, I believe. And I really hate the way that Moore and he wanted to announce something. So they acted like it's a done deal, and it ain't a done deal at all. So it's, I don't want to see that kind of thing happen again with another owner. Yeah. I want everything in writing.
Yeah. And I don't want Angelos and I don't want Snyder. I want somehow to get a Bisciotti 2.0. And if there's someone who made his billions hiring people and shown that he can hire people, I'd love for him to, exactly what you said, find a succession plan. And you know what, Ken, if I ever win one of those $1 billion lotto things, I'll be a minority owner. I got you. No problem. Don't worry about it.
There you
go. But a couple of other things that I was really thinking about with MacDonald, why I would really favor him, is when you have Lamar's contract, where can you upgrade with less? And to me, we already kind of have a little nucleus here. I want to knock on wood, but when Mark Andrews comes back, Isaiah Likely might be a player. Keaton Mitchell is really blown up. We have Zay Flowers. Like, we got some skill position guys that are going to last for the rest of Lamar's contract. So then you look at the defense on the other side of the ball. Like, how do you enhance that one? It's taking what Eric gives you, this clay of old vested veterans who play amazing MacDonald system, all these young guys in their second, third, fourth year. I mean, almost every player on our defense right now has an argument to be a Pro Bowler.
Right.
We could have 11 guys on our Pro Bowl. And to me, that's not a coincidence. That's MacDonald. So if we could create a succession plan, hey, you get, I don't know, $5 million a year for the next 5 years. And maybe if John wins the Super Bowl, that's what he's looking for, and he'll take a step aside. Mm-hmm. Then you continue to have this guy who could maximize our defense while we have Lamar. So to me, I really like that plan.
I'm for it, and I'm not in a hurry to kick John out the door. I really am not. And it is possible that this would not work out. It is very possible you end up with somebody who's great at managing the defense and does this very well, and it just doesn't work out as a head coach for whatever reason. And we won't really know that for sure. And the problem is you have a 80th or 85th percentile head coach in Harbaugh. You don't want to give him up for no good reason. I mean, it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to give him up either. I think my first reason that I sent you that message a month ago about this idea was not just that I thought MacDonald was great, which I do, and I don't want him to leave. But I don't know if you've heard or read the tea leaves or read between the lines. I feel like Harbaugh keeps saying, I don't know if I'm going to be here for all of Lamar's career. Like, I've heard that 2 or 3 times sprinkled in where all I can do is read the tea leaves with these guys. They're not going to tell us our intention. That would be a disadvantage to the team. Mm-hmm. I would not be surprised if he wins the Super Bowl and does the Ray Lewis mic drop and just says, this was great. By the way, we had this plan all along for Weaver or MacDonald or someone else to step in.
It's it's certainly something to think about. I don't have a sense either. None of the Harbaughs have given up their jobs early, right? Like Harbaugh Senior.
Isn't Jack still coaching?
Yeah, it might be. But if he's not, he coached, I think, into his 70s.
Oh yeah,
and so that's I don't know that I'd normally take that. I mean, my dad worked into his 80s, and I retired to do this at 52. So it's we're a little bit different in the family. So I can understand why the Harbaughs might not all be the same. But it's not obvious to me that a Harbaugh really wants to be gone. And by the way, it wouldn't even have to happen that they have a succession plan that is announced for the power dynamic in the locker room to change dramatically. And then you get problems that occur because an individual player doesn't like one parent's answer, so he goes to the other. And immediately that can break down a locker room pretty quickly if you have that. And even if it's a court of appeals situation where he gets a no from Harbaugh, he goes to the other and he says, is there any chance you can get this decision reversed? And he says, let me talk to John about it. As soon as that starts happening, that breaks down the power dynamic and the authority that's there. So it'll be challenging if they try and do it to make this work.
I agree. I think that if it works, we won't know until it happens. I think this is a retrospective experiment in the future where we're going to go, oh, see, yeah, this did happen, or there must have been nothing to it. And really, they probably have had this discussion last year, whether or not they wanted to do it. They evaluate everything. They have lots of people much smarter than me examining every kind of competitive advantage possible. So whatever ride we're on, I kind of have a lot of faith in our decision makers because so far so good.
Yeah, they definitely have done a great job, and that's something to be proud of. Well, David, great talking about this with you, and tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Probably just here, Ken. I like to shelter my anonymity and pop up from time to time and talk Ravens with you, but I appreciate the offer for the plug.
Oh, for sure. Anytime you want, David. By the way, other folks out there, this is just the kind of topic we love to have. This David, cerebral thought experiment, wants to talk through the issues. He came up with a whole bunch of things that we didn't get to everything by a long stretch in terms of reasons why you'd want to make MacDonald the head coach. But this is just the kind of content I'm looking for. Thoughtful, kind of delivered in 30 minutes or less. And if you have an idea like this, please hit me up. DM's always open on Twitter. I promise I'll get back to you. We'll turn this around fairly quickly. David mentioned this one took about a month. That's way longer than normal. And some of it was related to our schedules and travel and other things going on, the holidays. But normally it can take less than a week. If you really have an idea for something that's very timely, in particular, I'll try and get it on air very quickly.
This is completely my fault, Ken. It's my birthday, and I thought bi-week birthday, that sounds fun for me. So thank you for having me on. It was really fun.
All right, we'll greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.